Hello, welcome to today's webinar, Cancer Nutrition Tips and Truth. My name is Sarah Tarani and I will be moderating today's webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing on our website. We wanted to start today by sharing some information about Triage Cancer and our programs and resources. Triage Cancer is a national nonprofit organization that provides cancer survivorship education to patients, survivors, caregivers, advocates, and healthcare professionals. And we provide cancer survivorship education in 3 ways. First, we host a speakers bureau of experts in different areas of cancer survivorship. These speakers are available to organizations, cancer centers, and other groups who are hosting educational events and looking for a speaker on a specific topic. You can read more about our speakers and request a speaker on our website. In addition to the Speakers Bureau, we also host and participate in educational events all over the country for patients, survivors, and caregivers. We also host trainings for advocates and healthcare professionals, such as our in-service training on navigating cancer, work, and insurance. We have delivered in-person educational programs in 47 states and territories over the last 5 years. We also have the Insurance and Finance Intensive, which is a comprehensive certificate program for oncology healthcare professionals and advocates on health and disability insurances and finances. Registration is now open on our website for upcoming events. And if you would like us to offer an intensive in your area, please email us at info@triagecancer.org. We also host a series of Triage Cancer Conference on a variety of cancer survivorship topics. We will be in Ypsilanti, Michigan on May 5th, Reno, Nevada on September 22nd, Lewiston, Maine on October 27th. And please note that we offer travel assistance to patients and survivors to attend these events. So if you know of a patient or survivor, please have them go to our website and sign up for that. We also provide free CEUs for nurses and social workers. And if you can't attend an in-person event, we also offer these monthly webinars. The next one is on March 13th, Cancer Survivorship Care Plans and Late Effects. You can watch these live at your convenience or on our website, where you can also see the entire 2018 schedule. In addition to our educational events, we also provide online educational materials and resources. We have quick guides on various topics such as employment, finances, health insurance, and clinical trials that are designed to be a snapshot on a particular topic. We also offer state-specific resources on a variety of topics, as well as national and international resources. And because where you live can greatly impact what protections you have access to, we have charts of state laws on employment, disability, and health insurance-related issues. We also provide educational animated videos on cancer survivorship topics. We have this one on health insurance basics with key information that you need to know about your health, how your health insurance works, especially how to minimize your out-of-pocket costs. These videos are available in English with Spanish subtitles. We also plan to release a new video on how to pick health insurance plan next month, and there are more to come after that. We also host cancerfinances.org, which is an online tool designed to be a comprehensive source of reliable information for individuals trying to navigate finances after a cancer diagnosis. After simple, relevant questions pertaining to their situation, individuals with any type of cancer will be presented with personalized and actionable information. Currently, there are modules on health insurance, disability insurance, and financial assistance, and we will be adding new modules on education, employment, and other topics soon. And finally, we have an education blog that provides substantive information on cancer survivorship topics, highlighting resources in the cancer community. And it's also where we post late-breaking news that impacts the cancer community. You can also sign up for our e-newsletter to stay on top of new resources and the upcoming events. Now, with no further ado, I am delighted to introduce to you today's speaker, Julie Lanford. Julie is the Wellness Director for Cancer Services, a nonprofit in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. She's a registered dietitian, a licensed nutritionist, and a board-certified specialist in oncology nutrition. Julie developed cancerdietitian.com, a healthy living website for cancer survivors that translates evidence-based nutrition guidelines into consumer-friendly messages for everyday life. She received a BS in biology from North Carolina State University and a master's degree in public health nutrition from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks. All right. So hopefully everybody can see the slides and hear me okay. Today's topic is cancer nutrition, myths and truths. And so what I'm going to do today is to review a couple things. First, we're going to cover myths and truths around cancer risk reduction and survivorship. Some of the common questions that I hear from my clients who come in or talk with me online. We'll cover which specific foods have been studied for cancer risk reduction, and then what your overall food intake pattern should be for optimal health. And I sort of break this down into the three parts because what I find is that there's certain types of people who prefer to receive information different ways. And I describe the sort of detail-oriented accountant and engineer and maybe administrative assistant who's very on top of the details tend to like to know, well, what specific foods have these specific nutrients that we know are good for us? And then there's the more big picture people, which kind of, they don't want to be bogged down by the details, nitty gritty little things about this food or this nutrient or that nutrient, but they want to know what is the big picture. And I think that both angles are really important, and so we'll cover them both, and hopefully you'll be able to get what you need out of what we discussed today. So we're going to jump right into the myths, and these are, as I said before, things that clients ask me most often that I find are very misunderstood, or else they're sort of things that are hot topics in our current society or fads that many people are following that might not be based on good, solid science. So my first one here is the myth that acidic diets cause cancer. And the fact is that there's no good evidence to prove that diet can manipulate your whole body pH or that it has an impact on cancer. And so just, to understand that our bodies regulate our pH very tightly. And if our pH were to change very significantly, we wouldn't actually survive that. So it's a good protective mechanism for our bodies to keep a stable pH. However, when I look over, when these, celebrities, you think of Gwyneth Paltrow tends to do a lot of recommending of some, I would say, crazy diets. People are talking a lot about alkaline foods, alkaline diet, alkaline water. The truth is that your stomach acid is very acidic. And so it almost doesn't even matter how alkaline your water is when it mixes with an acid that's about as strong as battery acid. You're not going to have a significant difference. So the truth is that we need low pH to help denature things so that they can be absorbed and digested appropriately in our bodies. So we want our stomach acid to be that way. But by the time the food is digested into our body and absorbed and, spread throughout our bodies by our blood, we are not going to change the pH once it's in there. But when you look at what these diets actually recommend that you eat, I have a hard time arguing with them because they often recommend, you should eat more fruits and vegetables and nuts, and, you should eat less processed white foods, less alcohol, less added sugars. And, that in itself is probably good. It's just what they base their theory on is not good science. So we call that a myth. The alternating truth, though, what we know from strong science and multiple studies over and over showing the same results, is that we want you to eat more of a variety of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and legumes such as beans. Why is that? Because plant foods give us important nutrients called phytochemicals, and they are the basis for a cancer-fighting diet. They help neutralize damage to our cells the way antioxidants function. Antioxidants are actually a category of phytochemicals. Phytochemicals also support our immune system. Essentially, this is just how our body functions. We need these nutrients for our body to function at its best. The only place we can get them is from plants, which is why we want you to eat a lot of plants. Now, You might be wondering, hey, well, I've already faced a cancer diagnosis. So is this recommendation good for me and for my caregiver who hasn't had a cancer diagnosis yet? What we know is that the evidence-based recommendation for cancer survivors is that they follow the same recommendations we give for cancer risk reduction. So that's the good thing to know, is that you don't have to eat differently unless you have some sort of side effect or a result of your treatments that causes you to have some issues you have to work around. But in general, we want cancer survivors to eat the same way we recommend for the general public. The problem is, as we all know, most people in America not doing so great when it comes to eating a healthy diet. But there's certainly, some things that we should focus more on, and that's consuming more vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and beans. All right, myth number 2, which honestly is probably more like myth number 1. I hear it all the time. Sugar feeds cancer. So when somebody comes into my office, a lot of times they're very anxious about this. They say, well, I heard sugar feeds cancer and I should never eat it. And some people are even going so far as to avoid all fruits, to avoid all dairy products, to avoid all even complex carbohydrates they're avoiding because they've heard that that's a sugar. So the truth is that all of our cells, whether they're cancerous or not, use glucose, which is that basic form of sugar. We use glucose for energy. That is how our bodies work. And we don't get to pick and choose which cells get what fuel. So what we know about the cancer cells is that they actually metabolize glucose really, really fast. And so when you have a PET scan and you have a radioactive glucose solution that they've run through your body, and you see on a PET scan that the cancer, quote, glows, right? That's how people describe it. It's not because the glucose is just going only to the cancer. It's because the cancer is actually metabolizing that glucose really, really fast. And that's what the PET scan is picking up on. So the glucose is going everywhere in your body. It's just that it shows up in the cancer because of how fast it's metabolized, not because more of it goes there. So the way that glucose works, whether it comes from complex carbohydrates or added sugars, like you find in sodas or, candy corns here on the picture, the way that glucose works is that it actually gives all our cells energy, especially our brain cells. So, it's not true that sugar feeds cancer only. It also feeds all the other cells of our body. And the other piece about sugar is that there are lots of different types of sugars. And some of them, I would say, are much better for us and come in the packaging with other beneficial nutrients, like the strawberry, right? It has some fruit sugars in it, but also has a vitamin C, it has antioxidants, it has fiber, it has so many different things that's packaged with that natural sugar that we consider it a healthy choice. So the recommendation around sugar is that we avoid sugary drinks and limit consumption of energy-dense foods. Energy-dense foods just means, what most people understand to be junk food. So added sugars, sodas, of course, cookies, cake, ice cream, all those things are energy dense foods, and there's room for you to have some of them, but we don't want you to have a lot of them. The other thing about added sugars is that many people don't realize how much is already added in the products that they purchase. And so that's an important thing to kind of pay attention to. But really, this myth that sugar feeds cancer isn't completely true. But we do know that consuming sugary drinks does contribute to weight gain. Weight gain seems to correlate with increased risk for all types of diseases, of course. Water is your best alternative for a beverage. Unsweetened tea, unsweetened coffee are also healthy options if you want something different to drink. So I think those are important things to keep in mind. Myth number 3, and this is kind of a big one right now, especially if anybody has spent time watching some recent documentaries. As we all know, documentaries are someone's opinion. Documentaries usually are not consensus reports by scientific bodies. And so I think it's important to remember that it's really giving often just one point of view. So meat and dairy cause cancer. You should never eat it. This is what I call the myth. Forks Over Knives and the China Study is a book. What the Health is a documentary on Netflix that I do not recommend you watch, because what I find is when people watch that documentary, they come to me very anxious, very worried, and thinking that they have to be a vegan. So the truth about those documentaries is that they are basically put out by animal rights groups, so there is an agenda there. I certainly do not have a problem if somebody wants to be a vegan or they want to be a vegetarian. You can have a healthy diet that way. However, the fact is that it doesn't appear that vegetarian or vegan diets are any more protective than plant-based diets that include moderate to small amounts of animal foods. And so I know this is hard for us as Americans to think that, oh, we could have meat in moderation and it would be okay. We also tend to be people who are all or nothing. We think, well, if meat is contributes to risk for disease, then I should just have none of it. Not recognizing that, well, what we really want is for you to eat lots of plant foods. And if it helps you to eat those plant foods by flavoring it with meat, or you just like to enjoy dairy products here and there, moderation is fine as long as you're still getting plenty of those plant nutrients. So that's what the key is for in this case. There are some types of meats that we do see an increased risk for cancer. So the recommendation, this is from the American Institute for Cancer Research, who basically gets a lot of really smart, educated people around these specific topics. They bring them together. They review every study that's ever been done on that area. And then they look, of course, only at the well-done studies and those conclusions. And when there's enough evidence, they make a recommendation. So currently the recommendation around meat is to limit consumption of red meats, such as beef, pork, and lamb. Yes, pork is a red meat. And also to avoid processed meats. So we know there's convincing evidence that red meat is a cause of colorectal cancer or increases risk of it. And choosing processed meats increases chances of colorectal cancer. So when it says limit consumption of red meats, that means 18 ounces a week or less. A lot of my clients don't consume that much red meat. When they do have it, it's just here and there. So if it's 18 ounces a week or less, I wouldn't worry about it. Processed meats are really those meats where they've used preservatives. So if they use a lot of salt to preserve it, if they use nitrates, if it's hanging on a hook in the grocery store and, this is February, if the expiration date says July, that's not a good sign. Meat should go bad, right? So if it has a lot of preservatives in it, it's not good for you. And what we see is that with certain types of meats, if you eat it regularly and you have a significant amount of it, we see an increase in the rates of cancer for those people. And then the other thing to know about the meats is if you grill meats and they're cooked over a flame where the flame touches the meat, it forms those charred parts, and those can also increase risk for colorectal cancer. So just using common sense when you're grilling so that you don't burn your meats. Myth number 4, alcohol is good for you. This myth kind of came out of, oh, well, red wine is good for your heart, right? And the Heart Association for a little while had some recommendations around alcohol intake and red wine because of a phytonutrient in the skin of the red grape called resveratrol. When you make wine, you use a lot of skins, and so there's more resveratrol in the wine. However, there haven't been any direct comparison trials done to determine the specific effect of wine or other alcohol on risk for developing heart disease or stroke. So the Heart Association actually walked back, maybe 2 years ago, they walked back their recommendation around red wine. And I think that's really important because while resveratrol is good for you, alcohol itself, when we look at the evidence-based recommendations for cancer, that if consumed at all, limit your alcoholic drinks to no more than 2 for men a day and 1 a day for women. Because there's convincing evidence that alcohol itself increases risk for different types of cancers, including mouth cancer, esophageal cancer, breast cancer, colorectal cancer. And so we know that alcohol itself increases risk for cancer. So you sort of have to look at, okay, well, if red wine has some good parts and some not so good parts, is that something we recommend? I tell people if you don't drink, we do not want you to start. If you drink, then make sure that you're consuming only in moderation. And I don't think that you need to have an alcoholic drink every single day. The other thing is when it says limit drinks to 2 a day for men, 1 a day for women, you don't get to save those up for the weekend. So really, once your day's over, it's done. If you want to get resveratrol, we'll talk later about what types of foods you might be able to eat to give you that resveratrol that don't come with the harmful effects of alcohol. Myth number 5. This is also another good one because I get requests sometimes. People want me to come give a presentation on the latest superfood. The myth is that superfoods prevent cancer. Actually, I would say the myth is that there is a superfood, because the truth is there's no such thing as a superfood. What does that even mean? Mainly, it's a marketing term that's used to sell products. It has no scientific basis. And really, it's a gross oversimplification to say that any one food on its own could have a major influence over your chances of developing cancer. I actually have a friend who sent me a message yesterday saying, hey, what do you know about elderberry syrup? Because she has friends who are taking it as if it's going to enhance their immune system or prevent some sort of ill effects. And I was like thinking, what exactly? They're making syrup? Are you going to put it on your pancakes? Well, it told you to take it, and they were selling it for $20 for a little jar that's about the size of a jelly jar. That to me is, that's going over beyond, what is common sense. So certainly there's no superfood. However, we also know that your body best utilizes nutrients in food form. So I think that's another key, is that usually someone is using the term superfood to sell a product, and usually that product doesn't have the food form of that particular superfood. It's usually just an extract, a juice, a pill. And what we know is from studies over and over show that supplements do not give us the same benefit as consuming nutrients in food form. So the recommendation with all this data is actually don't use supplements to protect against cancer. That doesn't mean you shouldn't take a multivitamin, or if your iron is low, you should definitely take an iron supplement for sure. However, for a lot of people, they're just taking supplements under the assumption that it's going to improve their health. And what we see with data is that it's not the pills, it's actual food. So as I say, your body prefers nutrients in food, not pills. So if you want to take a multivitamin, it should be on top of an already, plant nutrient full diet. So that brings us to these phytochemicals. Where do you find them? Which kinds do you want to focus on? How can you make sure that you get plenty every single day? So first you need to understand what they are. Evidence continues to show that minerals, vitamins, and phytochemicals found in plant foods interact to provide extra cancer protection. There's over 1,000 discovered so far. I was just doing a little bit of research to try to figure out how many have we discovered so far. Some people say 4,000. I've seen comments about tens of thousands from scientists. The thing is, some plant nutrients we don't eat, right? And so some of them are plants that we eat. So definitely there's over 1,000. You don't have to know every single one. Even I don't know every single one, but they come generally in categories. So if you think of phytochemicals as this big group of plant nutrients, it's kind of broken down into little categories. So you have antioxidants, you have carotenoids, you have isoflavones, you have catechins. Within those categories are individual phytochemicals, and plants have a variety of them, which is why we want you to eat the plant version rather than the pill version. And when you eat them, they come packaged in the food with vitamins, with minerals, with other phytochemicals. And so they all combine to give you extra cancer protection, which is much better than just consuming one phytochemical on its own. How do they work? Well, they have a lot of different ways to function in our bodies, and depending on the category or the phytochemical, it kind of works in different ways. So it's like a team, right? This is your team coming into your body to help it function. So some of them stimulate your immune system. It can block toxic substances that we eat, drink, or breathe so that they can't become carcinogens in our body. That's cancer promoters. It can reduce inflammation that makes cancer growth more likely. It helps to prevent DNA damage and also can help repair DNA. So if you think about how cancer develops, it starts with damaged DNA that for some reason keeps repeating itself over and over and over again. So can we prevent that damage or repair the damage so it doesn't repeat itself? It can reduce oxidative damage to cells that Sometimes that damage can spark a cancer growth. It can slow the rate of cancer cells, so it is not a treatment in itself. However, can we help our bodies to control that growth? Possibly. It can trigger damaged cells to commit suicide before they can reproduce. We call this cell apoptosis, where if a damaged cell is sort of dies and we can package it and get rid of it so that it doesn't reproduce itself. And helps to regulate hormones, which is also an interesting area of research. So when I describe it, you get these phytochemicals from plant foods. It's grown in the plant. We eat the plant. It then is in our body and helps our bodies function. So basically, every time you eat, it's an opportunity to provide your body with the tools that it needs to function or to promote your health. So I want you to see eating as an opportunity to promote your health rather than seeing it from the negative, which is where a lot of people approach it. They think, well, I can't have this. That's bad for me. This isn't allowed. No, 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 which is very depressing. It's not a fun way to approach your life or your nutrition plan. Rather, I want you to see these foods that you're choosing as an opportunity to put in to your body the tools that it needs to function. So now we're going to go through those specific categories of phytochemicals and where you find those in the foods that you might choose. So the nice thing is, here's one phytochemical. A lot of people have heard of beta carotene. If you don't know, that's part of the carotenoid family, and there's several different carotenoids. So beta carotene is one, lycopene and lutein. If there's anybody who's noticed, people tend to talk about that for prostate health. Zeaxanthin is another carotenoid that is really beneficial. And so we find these in sort of groupings of foods. And this is why we tell you to eat your colors, because when you eat certain colors, as they grow naturally in the food, not the colors you find in like Kool-Aid, but when you eat those colors, you get a variety of these plant nutrients. So carotenoids, obviously, brown or orange and green, sometimes red. The lycopene and the lutein, many of you may know, or that they come from tomatoes or the skin of the tomato, especially for lycopene. The tomatoes are red, broccoli green, carrots are orange, sweet potatoes are orange. So those are, you don't need to memorize these crazy words that botanists come up with, right? You just need to know, hey, if I get a lot of different vegetables, they're different colors, then I'm providing my body a variety of phytochemicals and they're going to work. These categories of food, it means that they can sort of be used interchangeably in your body, which is why we also say just eat by the seasons. So if it's the wintertime and strawberries aren't in season, you can get the nutrients, some of the nutrients that you find in strawberries, in something that's in season during the winter. So they can work interchangeably, which I think is the amazing thing about our bodies. And that's, of course, how we exist, is we have to be able to adapt. So really being able to enjoy seasonal foods, I think, is fun, and it's tasty, and it makes your nutrition plan something to look forward to. Broccoli is a cruciferous vegetable. We'll talk about those in a little bit. Carrots, dark green leafy vegetables, tomatoes, winter squash, and sweet potatoes, all really great for you and good sources of carotenoids. Our next category is flavonoids. You may have heard about those because of, I think, tea and soy foods tend to sort of tout the benefits of flavonoids. Anthocyanins is one category or one type of phytochemical. Quercetin is another. What we see with those is you find them in apples, you find them in citrus fruits, onions, soy foods, and yes, coffee. The flavonoids can inhibit inflammation. So for those of you who are really interested in an anti-inflammatory diet, these are great things to focus on. If it supports your immune system, boosts your production of some enzymes that help to detoxify your body. When I see advertisements for, detox therapies, I think, why do people spend their money on those when they could eat healthy foods that naturally help your body function? We don't need a detox because we have liver and kidney that really do that for us. And as long as we're providing our body with the tools it needs, it's going to be able to do those things as part of our natural processes. Turns out, tastes a lot better than a detox. It's also a lot cheaper. And sometimes I think, those detoxes can actually be harmful. So really focusing on the foods in your lifestyle is a much better way to go about it. And it's great to know that coffee is good for us, right? Next group of phytochemicals is the indoles, glucosinolates, and isothiocyanates. And what you want to know about these is they are the most researched, I would say, category of food when it comes to interaction with cancer protection. We know that it can induce or help with that detoxification of carcinogens through that enzyme system. For whatever reason, certain people have DNA where when they eat cruciferous vegetables, it helps them to make this system more active. We cannot at this point, we don't have the ability to really check people's DNA and see if you have that type. Maybe in the future we'll have that capacity, but the good news is broccoli is good for you, whether you have that DNA or not. So lots of fiber and other nutrients. So everyone might as well just go ahead and enjoy it. The cruciferous vegetables are broccoli, that category of foods, cabbage, collard greens, kale, cauliflower is a really popular nutrient right now, or food. Brussels sprouts, my 7-year-old told me the other day, those are my favorite, which was a surprise to me. I'm happy about that. So there's really easy ways to prepare these. So one of the tips that I give people is that roasting vegetables is a easy and delicious thing that you can do. And something I actually just did this week that you can do is you can buy broccoli frozen. So I just got it at Costco, a package of broccoli. You can take it straight from the freezer, put it on a roasting pan, toss olive oil on it, salt and pepper. I think I put like garlic powder and onion powder, mix it all together. And then you can roast it in the oven at 400 degrees. I think it took me like 15 minutes. I stirred it up, maybe another 15 minutes, and they're really good. And I do the same thing with Brussels sprouts, whether they're fresh or you can also do that if they're frozen. So that's a simple way for you to prepare a healthy, vegetable side dish that tastes good and doesn't take a lot of food prep. You don't have to prep it when it comes straight out of the freezer already ready for you. Next category is inositol, also known as phytic acid. It is found in the bran from a few different grains. So corn, oats, and rice, and rye, and wheat. Bran have this phytochemical in it. You also find it in nuts and soy foods. So this is a reason why we know whole grains are good for you, because the whole grain includes the bran as opposed to refined white grains where the bran has been removed. Why would you want to eat the food where they've removed these beneficial nutrients? I don't know, except, people like white rice because it's fluffy. But if you can enjoy the flavors and the different textures of whole grains, you get a lot more nutrition out of the same amount of food. And then I also point out here that some of the more popular fad diets right now, paleo diet, ketogenic diet, are eliminating the entire grain group as if you're not supposed to eat it, which doesn't make any sense to me because there are so many really great nutrients for you. Also, gluten, there is nothing wrong with gluten for those of us who tolerate it. Most people do just fine with gluten. And so even the idea of avoiding wheat and rye is not necessary unless you have celiac disease or some sort of gluten intolerance. Isoflavones are the next category, mainly found in soy foods. So whether that's soybeans, tofu, soy milk, edamame also is a great, delicious, and easy food to eat. So you can buy edamame or the soybeans either in their pods, which you can see in this picture. That's a soybean with the pod. You don't eat the pod, okay? And then you could see the individual beans. You can buy them frozen either in the pod, which is kind of fun to eat. If you go to Japanese restaurants, you get the edamame. But also you can buy them out of their pods, which to me is a little bit more convenient. If you're trying to prepare a meal, is that you pull it from the freezer. I'll even stir fry them. So a little oil in the pan, and then pour them in the pan and just stir fry them until they're cooked. I think they're really good, really simple. And soy is, of course, also a form of protein. So it's a plant protein, which means you get bonus points. There has been some controversy around soy foods, especially for hormone positive cancers like hormone positive breast cancer survivors. Sometimes endometrial, ovarian, and prostate cancer can be hormone related. In the 90s and early 2000s, there was discussion around, well, soy has some plant estrogens in them. And therefore, if human estrogen is bad for these certain types of cancers, then would plant estrogens also be bad for them? And so out of extreme caution, oncologists were often recommending that these patients avoid soy. The thing is that with more research, we've found that that theory was based on studies done in rats. And the way rats metabolize soy is very different from the way that humans metabolize soy. And so it really wasn't, we couldn't apply it to humans. The other thing is we've done studies now with hormone positive breast cancer survivors. We've seen that those who consume soy foods do not have worse health outcomes. And often we're seeing that there's a possibility that it actually benefits your health. So for the most part, this is best a benefit to you when you consume soy over a lifetime. This is not something that you want to consume a whole lot of all at once. And you definitely want to stay away from those powdered versions of soy or soy bars and things like that. But the whole versions that you find in soy milk or soybeans or tofu is really good for you. Polyphenols is our next category of phytochemicals. Ellagic acid and resveratrol, which I mentioned before when we talked about red wine, is also a part of this category. The thing that I really like about the resveratrol is that you don't have to drink the wine to get it, right? It's in the skin of the red grape, and it turns out you can eat grapes. So I like that. Green tea is a good source of these polyphenols. So I would like for you to get your green tea in the form of, like you see in this picture, that you've brewed it yourself. We don't want you consuming green tea extracts or, powdered or supplemental forms of green tea. We want you to get it in the brewed leaf. And if you find bottled green teas, I'm not certain the process that they went through to get that. So I just imagine that somewhere Lipton has a big old vat of green tea powder that it mixes with water and puts into those, bottles that you find. And then we want to make sure that you're consuming unsweet tea, or if you do put any sweeteners in it, it's just very little. So it's best when you make it yourself, plain versions, and then sweeten it if you need to. Grapes, berries, citrus fruits, apples, whole grains, peanuts. You'll see that apples were on this phytochemical category and also on this one with the flavonoids. And that's the great thing about consuming food versions of nutrients, is that there's a combination in our foods of all different types of nutrients that are good for us. So we don't have to feel like, oh my gosh, I have to eat this for this and that for that. Or if you're taking pills, they'll want you to buy, how many different ones. Focus on the foods and you won't have to worry about it. This is the last category we're going to talk about today. Terpenes. It's found in cherries, citrus fruit peel, which limonene is actually a phytochemical found in the peel of a citrus fruit that's been thought to benefit or reduce our risk for skin cancer, which makes sense because citrus fruits grow in the blazing sun. They need that skin to protect the fruit. When we eat pieces of the skin, it also helps our body to function. So with that skin, you can do all kinds of things, right? Many people use the zest of the lemon to flavor foods. I encourage you to put that in like rice, or add it to your oatmeal or whatever. And what I've done with oranges, I'm going to make a smoothie with oranges in it. I put orange in it, and then I put a little bit of the peel to grind up in the blender. I would caution you, don't put too much because it's a very bitter taste. One time I just blended up an entire orange thinking, well, if the skin's good for me, I'm just going to do the whole thing. And I have a Vitamix, which is a really powerful blender, so I was able to blend it, but that was some thick orange juice and very bitter, did not taste good. that was too much skin. So, you know, we can use common sense and things should taste good. The cherries are, usually fresh cherries. It has to be a certain time of year, but I am able to find frozen cherries at Costco or at my local grocery store. Great ways to just snack. They're delicious snacks, especially in the summer, but they're good in smoothies. They're also really good if you heat them up and put them on like pancakes or waffles or something like that. Rosemary is also a great source of this. Where I live, you can grow rosemary year round. It never goes away. And herbs are great sources of phytochemicals as well. Anytime you can add things like oregano, basil, cinnamon. Yes, turmeric is an herb and it's good for you. It's not the only one. And again, there's no one superfood. So if you get a variety of herbs to flavor your foods, you're also adding up the phytochemicals you get in your day. So just as an overview, these sort of are the foods that we've discussed that provide us with the phytochemicals that we need to function. I get this list mainly from the American Institute for Cancer Research. So if you want to know more about any of these particular foods, you can go on their website, which is aicr.org, and find the foods that fight cancer. That is their list. And you can read more and more about each different one and which phytochemicals are in them. But to be honest, I don't think you need to know that much. Not everyone needs to have a degree in nutrition, okay, just to eat. You could choose these foods simply by eating lots of different colors. So the other thing that you really need to focus on is, what is your pattern of eating? Certainly there is room in a healthy diet to consume animal products. There's room to even consume what we call junk food, things like brownies and ice cream and cakes, because what's the point of living if we can't really enjoy birthday cake or have a picnic with the family grilling out? So I don't want you to feel like your diet has to be absolutely perfect, because it doesn't, and that's not any fun. But we do know a diet with a focus on plant-based foods can include animal foods such as low-fat dairy, fish, and small amounts of meats, as long as you're still getting plenty of plants. So I looked over several different diets that have been recommended for good health that I think are good plans. So if you want to know more about that, there is sort of I would say the good ones are the DASH diet, the Mediterranean diet, the anti-inflammatory diet, which I kind of looked at the pyramid from Dr. Weil, the My Plate, which is the government's version of what used to be the pyramid. It's now the My Plate, which I think is a great guide, very simple. And then the American Institute for Cancer Research has a New American Plate, is their guide for healthy eating. So what I did is I compared all of those and I pulled out what are the common themes across all of them. And so this is the list that I came up with that I like to advise my cancer patients to follow, is to try to get these on a daily basis. So the first thing is to consume 4 to 5 cups of fruits and vegetables combined every day. So when I break it down, usually that's including a cup of fruit with breakfast, a cup of vegetables with lunch, a cup of vegetables with dinner, and fruit or vegetables with snacks. Now, when you eat plant proteins for your protein, you get even more vegetables, right? So let's say you have a cup of vegetables with your dinner and you also have something like pinto beans for your protein. You're now getting even more, maybe a cup and a half of vegetables with dinner. And so while it sounds like a lot, 4 to 5 cups every day, when you break it down into these small amounts, it really should just be part of your plate. The second thing is focusing on proteins. Make sure that on a daily basis, you are choosing beans, nuts, or seeds as a protein at least once a day. If you're vegetarian or vegan, you're obviously going to be choosing these a lot more, which is why I think we see such great health outcomes among vegetarians and vegans. It's not necessarily the absence of meat that's particularly healthy. It's actually the fact that they consume so many more vegetables because they're choosing them as their protein every time. If you do eat meat, a small portion is adequate. This is really key. All you need at a meal, if you're consuming meat, would be a piece of meat about the size of the deck of cards or the size of a can of tuna. which is very small compared to what the typical person eats. So a lot of times you can cut your meat portions in half. You'll still get this 15 to 25 grams because a meat portion the size of a deck of cards is 21 grams. If you had a meat portion the size of what the typical American eats, you're getting 40 to 60 grams of protein at one meal. Your body can't utilize it at that time. And so any excess that you consume will be stored as fat. You don't need it. And so I'd rather you don't fill up on those big old pieces of meat because you need room to fill up on those vegetables. And we want you to spread that protein throughout the day. Like I said, it's best to have smaller amounts throughout the day of your protein so that you can utilize it. 100% whole grains is a common theme, 2 to 3 cups per day, and that is measured cups. So if you have rice or pasta sometime, go ahead and use a measuring cup, measure a half a cup, put it on the plate and see what that looks like. Because you might hear 2 to 3 cups a day. That sounds like a lot. It's not a lot when you actually see what it measures out to be. And for sure, choosing the 100% whole grains because they will give you more nutrients than the refined white grains. For fluids, we want you to have at least 64 ounces a day. Choosing plain water, you can flavor it with fruits and vegetables like you can have strawberry water, cucumber water, lemon water. It's just kind of fun ways to give a little bit of flavor. And then if you eat those produce, items after you drink the food, then you get extra fruits and vegetables, right? Drinking water and unsweet tea or unsweet coffee instead of sugar-sweetened beverages is really key as well. And you do get phytochemicals in that tea and coffee, as long as you're not throwing, a ton of whole milk and whipped cream and syrup in it. It's a good, healthy choice for you. The other way is to get more phytochemicals is to flavor your foods with herbs and spices. Buy plain versions of foods. Like I mentioned, brew your own tea. I buy plain yogurt. I flavor it myself at home. Yes, it tastes like sour cream, which is handy because you can use it in place of sour cream. But plain yogurt, if you just add a little bit of honey, can really be delicious, and you get to control how much honey goes in there. I did a cooking class the other day for survivors here in my area, and the thing that I had them try was, okay, use plain yogurt, use some granola that we made. I taught them how to make their own granola, and we used blueberries. They didn't even need to add sugar to their yogurt because the flavor from the blueberries and the granola was enough. Whereas if they bought flavored yogurt at the store, it would have had probably 15 grams or about 4 teaspoons of added sugar in that little cup. So those are good ways to add flavoring without adding extra added sugars or salt. So what does your plate look like? This is kind of the take home I hope that you get from our talk today is, okay, when I sit down to eat, what should my plate look like? Well, this is what the typical American's plate looks like. It's half covered in meat. I talked about that's about twice as much meat as they need. Any extra that they're consuming in terms of protein is going to be stored as fat. They fill up most of the rest of their plate with some sort of processed white starchy food, right? They are eating either white rice or some sort of white pasta. They might have grits in my area of the country, or some frosted flakes. And then they might have a little corner of vegetables. It's covered in cheese sauce, or it's just a slice of lettuce or a slice of tomato on their quarter pounder. And the problem is, first off, they're having too much meat, too much carbohydrate, and it's the refined, not healthy carbohydrates. And then they have a tiny little, corner of vegetables. That's the only place they're getting their phytochemicals. It's not enough. Their body needs more. So the current recommendation really does get you there when it comes to these plant foods. We want you to cover half your plate in fruits and or vegetables. So if you're measuring that, I would tell you that's about a cup. Your starchy food, whether it's a sweet potato, a white potato with the skin, it should only be a quarter of your plate. Things like rice, pasta should not be on your whole plate. It should be in the quarter. You might put your fruit and vegetables on top of it, but it should be anywhere between a half a cup and 1 cup, depending on what you're having, how much of it you need. And your protein really should be a small amount. And so the 15 to 25 grams is the recommendation. The piece of meat that's the size of a deck of cards is 21 grams of protein. If you consume a plant-based protein, it's a little bit different, but anywhere from a half a cup of beans to a cup of beans would be a good amount to have at the meal. So what's the bottom line? I say keep calm and eat your vegetables. And you'll notice nowhere in our presentation, nowhere in the evidence-based guidelines that I told you about, did we say you had to eat all organic. Did I say that you cannot have genetically modified foods? No. Those are issues that I think are important for us as a society to understand and to learn about. But there is not conclusive evidence at this point that you have to eat organic foods to have good health. There is lots and lots and lots of evidence that you need to eat plant foods, your vegetables, your fruits, your whole grains. It is not necessary for you to have organic versions of them in order to get those phytochemicals. And it is far, the beneficial components that you find in plants far outweigh any potential risk of pesticide residue that might be on your food. So what I tell you is if you want to organic and make you feel good, you like how the farmers are, taking care of the land and those kinds of things, I think that's a fine choice. But if you can't find it, you can't afford it, or you just don't want to have to worry about it, you do not need to. So I call it a choose your own adventure. Just like do you want to eat meat? You want to have dairy products? That's a perfectly fine choice. If you don't want to, that's a fine choice too. So try not to make yourself feel like, oh, I have to do this or I can't do that when it comes to foods. I think you should focus on what are the things we know? What do I need to include more of? And do that. And then the other things sort of can be, good discussion points or sort of the icing on the cake when it comes to your healthy eating plan. So that's pretty much what I've got for today. There are some ways that you can get more information if you'd like to know more. I've been writing cancerdietitian.com for 10 years now, so there's lots of information on there. I have other webinars you might be interested on there. We don't charge for any of those, the articles I write, and really I get my ideas from you all as readers and listeners. So if you have questions, feel free to email me. My email's on there. I am located in North Carolina, but I'm also on social media. So Facebook, Twitter, all of those places. If you like to get your information there, be sure you're following me. But that's all we've got for today. I hope it's been helpful, and I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah.
Thank you, Julie. Sorry, we're having problems getting to our last slide, but that's okay. We are wrapped up today. If you do have any questions, please email us at triagecancer.org, info@triagecancer.org, and you can always sign up for anything that we talked about on our website. Thank you very much and have a great day.